couple of Geminis, a couple of Apollos, a couple of shuttles.
Right.
He was head of the astronaut office. I remember well, we had a press conference, and for some reason the press got talking about crew compatibility. They considered that to be very important, and I guess it is, especially if you're going to go to Mars or someplace, very important. But they asked me about how I felt about that, and I looked at John and said, look, I want to fly in space so badly, I'd fly with a baboon. And John understood, you know, instead of taking umbrage at that, he understood exactly what I meant, and we were good friends before and after that.
He was quite the guy. So you did the first rendezvous and docking maneuvers then to demonstrate the capability. How did that come about?
Well, the thing we were most worried about in the moon sequence of events was the rendezvous and docking. And we had Buzz Aldrin. He was Buzz Aldrin had graduated number 2 in his class. I'm sure we'll have a brouhaha at the bar about which of those two is more important, the leaving or the arriving. And it's not for me to say, but as time goes by, I hate to be loyal completely to 11, but I think maybe the act of leaving is even a little more important than the act of arriving. But anyway, they're both very good. Yeah.
So I think the folks would appreciate a little bit of insight into the training. So you had, obviously you had rendezvous and docking training, you had the lunar lander training vehicle for the LEM. Joe, you were back up on 10, right? So what goes into the training as we're getting from 8 to 9 to 10 to 11, some of the unique aspects of how these vehicles flew? By the way, Joe, I heard you rolled the X-15, is that true?
Maybe.
Maybe? Was it that general that brought you in and tore the thing up?
No, there was a good reason for that.
Oh, okay.
It made sense. That's why I'm not at Leavenworth today.
But you didn't roll the OLTV, the lunar lander?
No, it was my first flight on the X-15, and it just handled so beautifully. It was a wonderfully flying airplane when you stayed well within the envelope. And I was just feeling the airplane out. The first ride was a $1 ride. You only went to half throttle because they didn't want you to be overcome by G's, and they were pretty impressive. But I was rolling back and forth, feeling it out, and it felt just like a fighter, just like a good fighter, and stable as everything in all 3 axes. And Bob Rushworth called and said, "Okay, Joe Henry, probably ought to look out the window and get yourself set up for landing," because we didn't have any guidance, no navigation, no guidance in the X-15. And I looked out and I saw the dry lake bed come screaming up underneath, and I'd never been anywhere near that high or that fast before. And I saw the lake bed going by me, and I thought, I could overshoot that sucker. And it didn't want to push over and get a negative angle of attack, because then the airplane did get squirrely. So I just rolled it up and let the nose fall through, did a sloppy slow roll, and got the nose pointed down, and then got the speed brakes out and got back into dense atmosphere. Got it slowed down and in. So I did it intentionally. But I did have to go up the chain of command with that story.
You did? Yeah.
I really did. I had to go to Don Sorley, the head of fighter ops at the time. He said, "Oh, I'd have done the same thing, but you better talk to Tom Collins." And General Collins was the head of flight test at Edwards, so he told him, and he said, "Yeah, I'd have done the same thing, but don't. You're going to have to go see General Branch." So I went to General Branch, the same guy who tore up my application, and he made me stand there. He made you sweat. You know, I walked in and I stood at attention for a long time. He had some papers, and it turns out it was just a local newspaper he was reading, but he'd thumb back and forth, you know, and finally he said, "Sit down, Engel." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Did you roll it?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I did." He said, "What'd you do that for?" I told him, And he said, huh, well, I'd have done the same damn thing, but you're going to have to go see Paul Bickle down there. I went to see Mr. Bickle, who was a glider pilot, had just set the new world's record for altitude in gliders. And Paul's gig was to sit back in his chair. He had this great big gut. He had a white shirt on every day, and he smoked a cigar. He'd, you know, flick the cigar, and the cigar ashes go on his shirt. You want to get up and come across the desk and wipe the cigar. And he said, okay, Joe Henry. He called me Joe Henry. He said, did you roll the airplane on your last flight? I said, yes, sir, I did. And he said, why? I told him, huh. And he said, I'd have done the same damn thing, but don't do it again. Everybody will want to do it. And sure enough, it turned out when they found out back at ops, you know, that I wasn't going to get thrown off the base for rolling the X-15 on the first flight. Everybody said, son of a gun, I really wanted to roll that airplane, now I can't.
Show the patch from Apollo 11.
Oh, I see it over your right shoulder.
So would you mind, when and Joe, you probably remember the shuttle patches, the crews would take charge of figuring out what they wanted for a patch, and I had no artistic ability. I handed that off to somebody else and I didn't worry about it. This is a very unique patch for many reasons, and no crew names on there, and people talk about the symbolism of that. How did you guys come up with this patch?
Well, I guess it started with Gemini 10. John Young's wife really designed the patch, and then turned it over to the two of us, and between us we decided that we did not want any names on it, that rather than the two of us who were going to fly Gemini, we wanted to honor the later on they called it 400,000 Americans in the early days of Gemini, probably half that, but that's still a slew of people. You try to put 200,000 people's name on a patch, and so we decided to go without it, and then one thing led to another. I more or less designed the Apollo 11 patch, and same reasoning there. At that time there were 400,000 Americans. And so I like going into MOCR, you know, Mission Control in Houston, all is lined with patches, and I think, I'm not sure, but I think Gemini 10 and Apollo 11 are the only two without crew names.
Fantastic. Thank you.
No, I really don't. The back of the moon is a little bit different. It doesn't have the Maria, you know, the flat thing they call C's. Terrain identical almost to that where Neil was able to put Eagle down. It's more craggy, more beat up, more fissures, more peaks that you don't expect, more of an uneven surface. But you know, what do you expect? I don't know, little green men or something. It's pretty much what you would expect, having seen the front part of the moon. Just like I say, it doesn't have the Marian, it's a little more beat up, but you've seen the front, you almost have seen the back, and so whatever. I think I have those beat into my head, and I wouldn't know one lunar module error code from another, trust me. But I started scrambling through my library, and I had an extensive library to try to find the right book and the right page to find what was 1201 or 1202. And about that time, the young guy in Mission Control in Houston he knew right away what it was, and he was willing to stick his neck out a little bit, I think, and say, go, fly, tell him go.
And your neck too.
Yeah, oh well. But no, he was willing to say it was a go, and flight director trusted him, and by that time perhaps the flight director and some other people were up to speed on the implications of either a 1201 or a 1202. So down they went.
Awesome. there's a photo that we have of Neil. He had spent some time with us here at EAA as well, back around the 2004 time frame, and there's the photo of him on stage with us right here. And Neil came out and shared a lot of stories. This particular night, we actually made a link to the space station, audio link, where we could talk to the crew on the space station. And Neil spent the evening talking to us about the study he had done on the Wright brothers, because this was the 100th, just after the 100th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. And what struck me about him is how he loved to talk about the airplanes and about the people he worked with, and not so much about himself or his accomplishments. And you know, we all cherish what you did as a crew. Any memories you'd like to share with us about Neil and how you were as a crew?
Well, I think there were about 30 of us who might have been considered for that job. And Deke Slayton, who was the primary chooser, I'm sure he was not the only one. We had a whole center full of people, but I thought there could not have been a better choice. Neil was a very intelligent man. He had interests that were far wider than NASA's space program. He was a historian, a native historian, primarily a historian of science. And I can give you all kinds of examples, but I'll give you one and then I'll give you a generality. After the flight of Apollo 11, we were thrilled to have a round-the-world look at 29 different cities. Neil was our spokesperson. Whenever we arrived, Neil made a short welcoming speech. He'd done his homework. He had the audience absolutely eating out of his hand. He had all sorts of local references. And understand, none of this was in any of the briefing papers that we had been given. This is Neil, Neil, and more Neil. At the end of the speech, he had those people eating out of his hand. They wanted to come on board an Eagle with him and fly it with him. He was just amazing in that regard. And I just think overall, he was just a magnificent choice to be first man.
Thank you.